Hello and welcome back to my lovely little podcast, Joking a Pod. Yes, the podcast where we try and destroy our competition, Stuart Goldsmith. Not literally. We just try and be better than him, which is clearly a joke because I would love to interview Stuart Goldsmith and tell him in person that, well, obviously this podcast is inspired by that, but we try and destroy the competition from the inside. Basically, through the internet, we try and destroy him, which is a very simple method. You basically don't press delete on my podcast, and you try and find the delete button on his, and delete to get rid of the competition. But we digress. My guest today is best known for appearing on an episode of the Clinton Baptiste Paranormal Podcast. It's one and only Mike Cox.
Hello, I'm doing Tom. All right.
Right. So we'll start at the very beginning because Julie Andrews once said, and will always say, it's a good place to start. How did you get into the world we called comedy?
I started many years ago. I did a comedy course, which is often frowned upon by a lot of people. But yeah, I did a comedy course, Jill Edwards comedy course in Brighton, and I did it just because I really wanted to get into comedy. I loved comedy, but didn't know what to do. I come from a pretty working class, like non-performative background, and didn't know about open mic nights. Didn't know about didn't have any other friends who did comedy. So I thought, well, let's go and try and do that. So I did that for a bit, all the way back in 2011, and then never stopped. And that's where I am. Why I am where I am now.
Yeah. And when you joined the comedy circuit, what was it like when at the point you entered it?
So there were a lot more sort of bespoke comedy clubs knocking about. So you still had your jonglers, and you still had I think Highlight. I know they were the same thing for a while, but there was yeah, lots more of those types of clubs. They seem to have gone now, whilst owing people a bit of money. Not the current jonglers, just to hasten to add. And lots of open mics and stuff like that. I think it's a bit more tricky now. Sort of cost of living crisis and things like that means that clubs don't last as long. But yeah, it was quite. I started in Brighton, so the open mic scene was absolutely like buzzing when I first started doing comedy. You could gig like 7 nights a week, sometimes twice a night. Not that I did do that because I didn't live in Brighton, but you could have done. It was really busy. It's really great.
Yeah. And how do you reckon that the comedy scene has changed since from your opening, from being there in the heyday to where it is now? How do you reckon it's changed over time?
In a couple of ways, I would probably say, and I don't. I mean, obviously, I wasn't pro when I first started, but I think I'm quite surprised by just how much of my work is done in village halls and
Yeah.
like sort of pop-up venues and that sort of thing. That seems to be where a majority of the circuit work is now.
Yeah.
So that's probably where it's changed the most. I think audiences have you hear a lot of people say, "No, you can't say anything in comedy these days," and I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think you have to be better at what you do now. You're not going to get away with some of the sort of lazy comedy you might have heard in the sort of 80s and 90s, and audiences are a bit smarter in what they will willing to accept. But I still think that there is room to say whatever you want as long as you do it in the right way. You know, punching in the right direction, saying the right thing, remembering who the target of the joke is. Those things have always been true in comedy and are now. I just think more people are aware of it.
Yeah. And because of the rise of internet, and it's not just YouTube, it's other platforms. Do you think that the comedy, live comedy, uh, works really well on the internet, or do you think that live comedy needs to stay where it is? Like, the like upload clips of someone saying some really random joke in the middle of a 5 minutes. Do you reckon that that sort of thing works really well, or do you reckon that that's just hindering having audiences in person?
I think a bit of both, and I think it depends on the type of content that you're posting. I think the tricky thing that you may have is if you post a certain type of content that doesn't really relate to what you are as a live performer, you're attracting an audience that fundamentally isn't going to enjoy what you do when they come and see you.
Yeah.
Um, what you also do is I was having a conversation with someone about this yesterday, is that when audiences see you online and then they come and watch you, they're now watching you at your pace, whereas before online they're enjoying you at their own pace. They can skip through your jokes and scroll on, whereas now they have to sit and watch you. And if there is a slight, lack of speed or rapidness in your delivery that you can replicate online, audiences don't necessarily like that as much. I think there's room for clips. Obviously, you have to advertise yourself online now. You're going to get left behind. That's just the way it is. So I think you just have to make sure that whatever you're posting online echoes your persona and what you're doing if people come to see you. Because if they don't marry up, you're going to have a tricky time. I think something that Paul Smith suffers from a little bit, because he does his crowd work and stuff like that. Then when people come to his show, and you can see the comments online that he gets sometimes, where people just be like, all he does is talk in the front row. That's not what all he does. He does actually do a bit of show, but then you also get people saying, "Oh, I wanted to see him talk to the front row, and actually he did a bit of jokes. I didn't like it." So now he's having a difficult time. I say not that difficult time. He's bought a flipping McLaren, but you know what I mean. Like, he's probably being, he's a success, a victim of his own success. But you can also see, I guess he's the perfect sample, if you like, of how that your online persona can affect how people see you. I'm sure he doesn't mind as he drives around at 100 mile an hour, but
Yeah.
he's the first example I can think of, because he's the most prominent online poster of content, in our world. So,
And you mentioned there people watching it at their own pace. I mean, it would be really disappointing if they were watching it 2 times speed and they come and go, "He's not talking that fast." That would be really disappointing.
yeah, I thought the show was going to be over by 9. I'll be back in bed. Looks like it's going to drag on. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you reckon that because of the online space, do you reckon that sort of, not just because of it, not just the live stuff, but the regular online comedy, do you reckon that helps grow the industry? Because it means that people that wanted to be in comedy before, that didn't know where to begin and didn't have access to courses like you, do you reckon that the online space helps them to be able to move forward and go on to do live stuff?
I think you see that in the number of people who are currently on tour who started off doing online content. Like, it's a way in now that didn't exist before. Like, you can almost leapfrog the live circuit now by just creating constant good content that brings you a following, and then you can go on tour. I mean, again, this is where it's tricky. It's difficult to avoid the hard work and the apprenticeship in commas, open, whatever you call them, and because you have to get good, you have to know how to write, you have to know how to perform and react to what's in the room. There is work that needs to be done. There's a huge difference between posting TikToks and then playing to 200 people in a theatre space, and what people have got to be careful of is leapfrogging what is a vital experience in the comedy process.
And one of the things you do in your career, and most comedians do it generally. It's a common thing. When you're performing, so performing to another audience that isn't your necessarily audience, like when you're on Tour Sport or when you're working with people like Alex Lowe, do you find it hardest to come up with material because you know that the audience you're performing to that night might not be there to see you per se? They're not your audience per se. Do you reckon that that's harder to do because you have to try and work out what someone else's audience wants?
Yeah, certainly when I first started doing it, it was a bit like that. I think as I've got a bit older, I have a lot of my material is quite relatable to the people who go to see Alex as Clinton Baptiste and stuff. So I talk a lot. I mean, I'm 42. I talk a lot about being a dad. I talk a lot about being a husband, and it's something that lots of people can relate to. So I'm pretty fortunate on that front that, if you're in an age bracket of probably 30 plus, you're going to understand a lot of what I say at some point. If I find myself in a room where there's a much more significant younger audience, I have a bit more of a difficult time. I had to stop playing universities. I used to do them a fair bit when I was younger, but I just don't do them anymore because just my stuff just doesn't relate to them. if there is a mixture and there are young people in the room, I can adapt my material. So I'll end up, what I tend to do is, rather than just talking, here are my experiences, I almost say to the younger people, this is what's in store for you. And just sort of, I try to bring them in, because that's what comedy is about, really. It's just about people relating to what you're saying. So what I don't want to do is talk and then just have an entire demographic of people go, this is not for me, and sit it out. I'll always try and bring them in. But this is what I'm talking about when you say you have to do the work on the circuit. You have to learn that sometimes people are not going to necessarily understand what you're talking about or relate, and you have to learn about how to adapt your material, or adapt your performance on the night to try to get as many people in the room to enjoy it. So that's what I try to do. So I'm pretty fortunate on that front. I'm what you might call an everyman.
Yeah. And you mentioned there about not doing universities, because I think that what university students now want, and I don't know this definite for a fact, but I know it happens. They want Paul Chuckle in the background DJing. That's what they really want. University students, they just want a bit of Chuckle Brothers. One half of the Chuckle Brothers doing techno at a nightclub. They're all getting really drunk, and he's there just DJing. That's what they really want, which is odd. Or Dick and Dom just randomly shouting bogies whilst listening to some trap music and bogies. And and one of the other things you've done that is both a step forward for the fact that it happens, and because it's the type of thing that the format needs more of. And it's also a odd thing because it then makes you really question society and what's real. And what's it like being a guest on the Clinton Baptiste Paranormal Podcast?
It's all right. We've known each other for a few years now, and he's a character that I really enjoy. And Alex, I really enjoy his company. He's a great guy. So it's just a bit of fun. It's just like carrying on with like what it's like in the green room, I suppose. Yeah, nice. And it's a great podcast, very funny.
Yeah, yeah, and it's one of those where you listen to it as a fan of the character, and then you realise, oh no, he's a person of his own. He's not really nice for the TV show, and then you're really confused and don't know what's real anymore. I just think that's the best bit, like Paddy McGuinness walking in as Paddy McGuinness, not as any other character he's played in the show that the character from. I just think that just adds to the comedy value, because you're then going, am I real? Is everything real? And it questions society, and or is that just me? That's probably just me. And one of the other things you've done, and it's an achievement in itself. What would it like to win the main prize of the Not So New Comedian of the Year 2022?
Nice. It was nice. Yeah. So for those that don't know, the not so new comedian of the year is for comedians who've been around for a bit, but still nobody knows who they are. So yeah, you have to have been going for, I can't remember a number of years, but a significant number of years. Um, uh, and so yeah, there was a really good lineup. Final was good, and yeah, so winning that was nice. It was nice to it's nice to know, because when you are somebody who has been going for a while and yet nobody knows who you are, you can find yourself on your journey going, am I doing the right thing? Should I just jack this all in and get a proper job? Um, so it's nice to just every so often just somebody go, no, you are doing all right. You are on the right path. So yeah, it was nice, and gave me a bit of confidence, really, like I probably needed at the time. And straight after that, I entered British Comedian of the Year and got to the final. Um, so yeah, it was just a nice little period. I think I've been going about 10 years. I've been pro for about four, and just yeah, it was a nice little boost. And I still got the certificate up there on my wall somewhere. So.
Yeah. And do you reckon that doing these comedy awards, do you reckon they're beneficial to help you know that you're doing great at the job, you're doing really well, rather than the main point of winning the thing? Do you reckon that it helps your confidence more because you know that you can get to this certain point in your career, you can entertain people really well, and you're less judgmental on yourself?
So they are good. Depends what period of your career you're in. So a lot of new act competitions, they're really good to enter because you'll get to experience hanging out with other acts. You'll get to the good thing about a lot of the new act competitions, is you get to play if you're in the final, get to play venues that you're probably not going to play for a few years yet. So it's just a great experience. I guess my advice to people who are applying for new act competitions is don't worry about what happens. It really doesn't matter. Like, if you don't get through, okay, fine, go away, keep trying, and then all the time that you can qualify, keep reapplying. Don't worry about it. If you win it, absolutely great, but that doesn't mean you're a pro yet. So don't give up. Still, there's still so much work to do. With competitions that are a bit older, so like British Comedian of the Year and Not So New Comedian of the Year, and I'm sure there are others. They're nice just to again, put you in that competitive environment. Helps you work on what you're doing and see what other people are doing. It would be nicer if a lot more industry people were a bit more aware about the competitions. So, for example, winning Not So New Comedian of the Year, no industry at the final. I think there was one person who did half a review on it. Didn't really benefit me in career wise. It was nice for me to win, but it wasn't that launch pad that they used to be. So I guess that's where people have to be mindful. Don't rely on a competition to change your career. Just do it because you want to, and do it to see what happens, and do it for yourself. But yeah, don't expect anything to come out, and don't be disappointed if it doesn't, because that's just the way things are now.
Yeah. And at what point, and this is like a question people ask, and no one has a definitive answer, but at what point for you did you think to yourself, now's the time I can call myself a comedian, and when people say, what's my job, I can say comedian? At what point in your career was that viable to do that?
God, I still wonder whether I should, uh, I guess it was just um, when all of my work was paid work. Like there was a period where you're doing the odd paid bit here and there. Well, people will trust you, but you're still grinding on the open mic, or doing stuff for like you know uh, 20 quid, 30 quid, whatever. Just a bit of your expenses and stuff. And then I transitioned into everything that I did is on a pro lineup. Everything I do is for a proper pro fee. And I went, and it probably even took a couple of months after doing that, going, hold on a second, I'm actually doing this for real. There is no moment like in Rocky where you get to the top of the stairs, you go, yeah. You just suddenly go, oh, hang on a sec, I'm actually doing this, and then you just go, I guess I can say that now.
Yeah.
So just a little moment of realization when you look at your gig list and go, oh bloody hell, all of this is good. This is what I've been trying to do for a long time.
Yeah. And one of the things you've done is, I would say, brilliant, and it is sad that it no longer continues due to the fact that a TV show's done a very similar concept. Well, the TV show's no longer happening, I think. What would it like being a guest on the online panel show What's in the Box?
That was fun. That was fun. You've done some research on that. Yeah, I enjoyed that. I think there's a lot more space for sort of YouTube type game shows for stand-ups. Um, yeah, I really enjoyed that. There are good people on that show as well. Um, it's something I'd like to do a bit more of actually. Like I'd like to think of some online game shows because there isn't really much unless because obviously Mock the Week has gone. You've still got QI, but there's only room for sort of one or two stand-ups on there. You've still got Taskmaster, but that is what everyone's striving for. So there needs to be a little bit more sort of accessible game show type stuff, I think. But it's just going to take a hero, which I don't think is me, to go online and create one.
Yeah, and I think that, and being in this realm of knowledge of like panel shows are amazing all around the world, and radio and television, all this. I think that online panel shows, when you find one that qualifies as a panel show, because sometimes you watch one of them think that's actually a quiz show because it's heavily relies on them knowing who's winning or knowing. And the ones I've made, because I'm not great at math, I get confused and then give someone 1,000,000 points by accident, and then I try and lose points, and then I get so confused. I go, I have no idea who's won, and then they have an argument about who's actually won. And do you reckon that the online space for this type of thing will help the growth of panel shows, or do you reckon that the panel shows are dwindling in themselves because they're not as popular as they once were?
Do you know what? I don't really know the answer to that, and that's I guess the only way you're going to know is by trying to do online panel shows and seeing what happens. I guess the risk is what happens with on what's in the box is if it's on YouTube, there's nothing stopping a TV guy just taking it, changing it slightly, and making it into something else. I guess you just have to rely on the audience to recognize what came first.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, they did that a little while ago with I forget the name of the actor, but you aware of a character called President Obonjo?
Yes, I have. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then that they Channel 4 then tried to create that show with a similar African dictator, and generally speaking, the online comedy world didn't stand for it, and nothing really ever happened with it. So that was a sort of a victory for original online content, original characters, and not letting TV win. So yeah, if we can get audiences to realize what comes first, and what's in the box, had a great online following, whether it was big enough to survive, or and obviously it wasn't because it isn't here anymore. But that's what you'd hope for, anyways. That there is room. There should be room for everyone. People still watch TV, but lots of people don't. And this is again where comedy's changed over the years. Is now everybody? Sorry, back then everybody used to have to watch the same thing. This is why some comedy shows had like 6.5 million followers. Well, because the alternative was turn the telly off and look at your family. Now it's you can go on your phone, you can go on your laptop, you can go, watch different things. Four people in a house could all be into different stuff. That's so there should be room for everything now without nicking people's ideas. And if you like an idea that's on YouTube, don't steal it. Get the people from YouTube and put it on the telly. That's what we should be doing.
Yeah, yeah, because things like that have happened more recently, and I can't think of what the original thing was called, but the Steve Coogan production company made Live from the Moth Club, and obviously it was then there was a court case based on the idea that it was someone else's idea, and I think that also I think even though it sounds like a negative thing, I think that's positive enough to show that there's enough things online that are worth people's attention. If you love such a thing on TV, well, there's probably something even better on YouTube that also adds it. And do you reckon that that's a positive, even though the news about it sounds negative? Do you think that's still a positive thing for the online world?
I think so. I think so. Like, I think any amount of choice that you have to watch what you want to watch is a positive one. I think any option that you have to create what you want to create without gatekeepers is a positive one. Um, I guess obviously with online content, you just have to be. It's not as well. I don't know what the word is, policed or whatever. So there is always a risk that online does contain things that it should contain and that sort of thing, and people say things that they shouldn't say, which I know has happened with comedians on online game shows before. I won't mention any names, but there unless you have somebody who's fully aware of what's appropriate, broadcasting rules, which is telly are applicable to. It's much more difficult to make a mistake on television unless it's live. But with YouTube, you can still make a mistake, someone not edit it out or whatever, and you can have those issues. But yeah, I think it's a positive one. It's obviously going to change, things going forward. I certainly notice it in comedy now, where what might be a reference that you understand is now not something that you can guarantee that everyone else is going to understand. Because even kids, like my kids, two young kids, they watch shows on Netflix and stuff like that. They don't tend to come home at 3:15 and watch the same CBBC. They'll watch stuff on Netflix. So what's to say that their friends are watching the same stuff?
Yeah.
When I was at school, you remember go, did you watch this yesterday? Did you watch that yesterday? Everyone's like, yeah, we all watched it.
Yeah.
But my son's watching The Investigators on Netflix, which is an Australian show. Meanwhile, someone else at his school may be watching Bluey, where another Australian show. But like, where is the where as they grow older, they start doing comedy, and they'll do a reference, and people their own age might not even know what that means. So it's be interesting to see how that changes the way that comedy's written.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't see it as a negative.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned there about going to school and enjoy it. I used to do that, and the answer was no, I didn't. I've got a life actually. Um, and it's one of those things. And you're right. Every person has their own selection of things that they know that someone else might not know. So I would have a conversation with someone about Funhouse, and they would go, "What on earth are you on about?" And I go, "Yeah, I understand you don't know what I'm on about. I barely know what I'm on about half the time either, but it makes sense, and I think that's why there's so much comedy, because there's so many people are in so many different avenues. You've got to find, so like when you have like comedians heavily into, like, let's say Toby Haydock is heavily into Doctor Who or Quatermass, he would then do things on that, and that would be for his audience, and there's enough people for that. And do you reckon that that's what makes comedy so great, because of the way that the world now works? You don't need to be into the same person. You could be into so many different people, because people got so many different avenues to express their love for so many different topics and genres.
Yeah, and I think that's something that is the benefit of individual social media. Like, so I use Instagram mostly for my comedy, so people sort of get to know who I am via that. I am on, I always want to say Twitter, but I know it's X or whatever. I'm on there, but I barely post any comedy on there. Everyone on there just knows me as the Arsenal fan, and I just so like you can use social media to express different parts of yourself and gain different audiences in different ways. So yeah, and I think it's a nice way of showing people a side to you that you can't without social media. Without social media, you are just what your content is. You are just what your stage persona is. With social media, you can allow people to actually see who you are a little bit more, to um, maybe have a bit more of an understanding of what your comedy is or where it comes from. And sometimes you can live and die by your live or die, sorry, by your online persona. And you might say a joke and people take it seriously, and it's not until they know you as a person they go, oh, obviously you're joking. Like it's incredible just how many comedians are held to a higher standard than politicians for the things that they say. And yeah, it's important just to understand who the person is, why they've said it, and where that comes from. And I think social media lets you do that.
Yeah. And are you? And this is a very broad thing to say. And it's the greatest thing that I think I'll ever say. Are you the type of person that spends, before you say, for instance, you've got a gig in the evening? Are you the type of person that spends all day writing the material and checking through your material? Or are you the type of person that does the Billy Connolly and walk on stage, says what you feel like, then forgot what you said 20 minutes later?
I wish I could be like Billy Connolly. I'm somewhere in between. Like I already know what I'm going to say. I don't write that much. Like I'll if I have an idea, I'll tend to write it in the notes on my phone, um, and then I'll have a little think about it. I might think of a couple of punchlines. I don't maybe know where it sits. When I go and do my gig in the evening, I'll do what I know I'm going to do. Um, if I can remember to put a new bit in there or play with something a little bit, depends on what the gig is. Obviously some gigs are more appropriate to play around than others. I'll have a go at putting it in and see what happens. If there's a bit of legs there, I'll maybe go, okay, so there's something there. I'll take it away. I'll have a bit more of a think. I find it quite hard to write stuff down because I don't know if this is the same for everybody, but I always tend to write in a way that is not how I speak. So like there's no point me writing stuff down and then learning that because that is not how I'm going to say it. So I'd much rather um, just play with it a bit. And what I quite like is saying something on stage, and then because it's not landed, you suddenly feel this intense panic where you go, "What am I going to get out of this?" And that's where I'll end up just instinctively saying something. I mean, I'm not saying every time that I suddenly discover gold, but that tends to be where I do most of my learning and my writing is just in that pressure cooker of looking at a load of faces, going, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah. And when you go to do these gigs, because a lot of them, like you might be on a bill with a mixed collection of people. Do you have a rough idea of the sort of, or like sort of age range of an audience you're going to get to make sure that you can adjust certain aspects?
Um, only when you sort of get there and have a look at the room, you can sort of see. Um, Generally speaking, at the moment, and whether that is just so whether it's cost of living or whether it is just the way that culture goes, that most audiences tend to be the sort of age group I mentioned earlier on. Like they do tend to be, and maybe those are the people with disposable incomes at the moment, or those are the people who are not having to work evenings as a lot of young people are having to do, and that sort of thing. So, um, and young people have a different culture now. They they're much more about their own mental health and taking care of themselves and going to the gym. I read the other day that modern gyms are having the problem is that a lot of young people are actually going to the gym. What they've done for many years in our generation is that they've survived on people paying for gyms and never going. Well, this amazing generation of people who actually look after themselves are paying for gyms and going, and now all of the gyms can't cope with how full they are, which I thought was funny. Um, but yeah. Generally speaking, audiences are kind of at the moment what I expect them to be. So I'm again pretty fortunate. And like I say, if I go out there and I see that there is a pocket of young people, I think there's a clip online that I did a gig in Pinner recently where there was quite a significant group of young people on the left. And in my material, I just bring them in. I just say, look, this is what to expect. Enjoy your life now, but this is the reality of it. So
Yeah.
they can join me in my existential dread.
Yeah. For anyone that's got to this point in the interview and are enjoying themselves and have realised I'm better than Stuart Goldsmith, that's clearly a joke. No one's never going to be as good as some people might be as good as Stuart Goldsmith, but no one's had a popular children's program that only 12 people remember, including me. And what advice would you give someone that's watching this who wants to be a comedian? What's your key bit of advice that you would give a up and coming wannabe stand up?
Don't be afraid to fail. Um, Most of the time, when you are concerned, and this is advice I need to follow, it's not even something I still get right. But I've spent a long time fearing getting it wrong, and it just means that I didn't push myself as much as I probably could have. I didn't, push boundaries. I didn't try enough things. I kind of just spent a long time going, this is funny, try it, whatever, And if it didn't work, I would bin it and then try something else, and I wouldn't pick stuff up and try again.
Yeah,
So that would be my biggest bit of advice. We're all going to enter into this game on different paths. Our journeys are not going to look the same. So don't worry about what other people are doing. Just worry about yourself. And don't be afraid to fail. Most of the time, you might have a death. Do you know what? In a week's time, month's time, no one's going to remember it. You'll remember it in every vivid detail, but no one else will. So
yeah,
don't worry about it. Just pick yourself up and move on.
yeah. And with this is the same for most um uh, performing arts in I'm going to call it arts because I'm including music into that. But do you think that for you personally, do you think that comedy has helped grow your confidence in everyday life, not just when you're on the stage?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's doing comedy has it's given me a sense of identity, I suppose. It's always something that I wanted to do. It's always something I felt I was able to do, and all the time that I wasn't doing it, it doesn't feel good. So like to feel like I have found my place in the world is nice. Um, don't get me wrong, I still suffer, as a lot of pro comics do, with that imposter syndrome. When you see some people that are incredible and you just go like, I can never be like that. What am I doing here? Why am I wasting my time?
Yeah,
Again, this is me looking over at someone else, and you can't do that in this game. You have to just focus on yourself. You have to build your own audience, and this is again where I say don't be afraid. You'll hear a lot of people going, "Oh, look, there's another person with a podcast." Who cares?
yeah,
Go into a library. There's a lot of people who've written books as well. Like you can't just like give up just because loads of stuff exists already. Let your audience find you and enjoy the content that you create. There might be 1 million podcasts out there, but there is an audience out there that enjoys your podcast. So just focus on them, focus on yourself. Yeah. What was your question again? I can't remember what you asked me.
Well, I was asking about that your confidence, if it's improved your
Oh,
confidence.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it definitely has. Like I think being on stage, you become a more confident person just because you have to be. You know, you have to fake it till you make it, kind
Yeah.
of thing. Like, you know, I remember before a lot of gigs, I'd be like backstage going, you know, trying to do all the warm ups that you've learned and things like that. That's gone now. Like I've learned how to control that. So that's something that you can do in everyday life. You know, you are going to find times in your life where you're nervous, just you know, in different aspects, you know, beyond performing. So that's helped me. Um, just being on stage and having to react and think quickly. That's something that I also now do in my life. So you know, if I'm in conversation with people, or you know, I can think relatively quickly about what to say and how to say it. So yeah, it's certainly given me a lot more confidence publicly, you know, speaking to people. Because you know, oddly, like a lot of stand-ups, I on stage give it all like the wee. I'm still the same guy who goes down to the school run and hopes none of the other people talk to me. You know, like, I'm still a bit like that. So, but it has helped me in case people do. You know, so yeah, definitely. And even if you are starting out in comedy with no real intention to take it anywhere, like when I did that comedy course, there were people in there who just wanted to gain confidence in public speaking or presenting. Um, there were just people who wanted to make friends. You know, there was still loads of room for all of that in there as well. So yeah, you could start comedy and do open micing and be entirely happy with just that. And I know lots of people that are, you know, they're very successful in their daily careers, but they just want somewhere to share a hobby and a passion. So comedy can give you that confidence as well. So
Yeah, and because you've said throughout this interview about how you've always wanted to do this. As a child, is there one thing that made you go, "Oh, I want to do"? Is there anything that inspired you to think that's a career that's possible for me? That's something I could give a go at.
uh, I didn't think it was a viable career for a long time, but I did. So when I was younger, my dad used to have a lot of records, and one of the records, I think he had two of them, was Jasper Carrot, which I know a lot of young people will be like, "We're talking about." Um, but he used to have Jasper Carrot's albums, and I would listen to those. And he's obviously very different type of comedy to what I do. He plays a lot more folk music, but there's some jokes in there. Um, and I just used to listen to him saying, and this is where I found what the magic of stand up is it was just him and a microphone, occasionally a guitar, but I focus more on the jokes and stuff. Um, and then I would just hear this absolute roar of laughter. And I was just like, I want that. I want that. I want to say something and have people hear because I've always enjoyed jokes. Like you know, growing up, people always used to buy me joke books and things like that. Because I was just that's what I was into. And yeah, just listening to those Jasper Carrot albums is just where I sort of fell in love with it. And then coming from the background I was then like the next comic I was introduced to was Roy Chubby Brown, right? Which you know, you can have your opinions on Roy Chubby Brown, but when I was a kid, listening to that, listening to all those like naughty words and listening to them naughty songs and listening to the people laugh, I was like, you know, just reiterated to me that this is what I want to do. Um, so it wasn't until I was a lot older that I actually thought I'm just going to try this because, you know, I was 29 when I started comedy, you know, and it's funny as you're older, you look back at 29 was so young, but back then 29 was like I'm nearly 30, my life's nearly over, I need to do something. So yeah, so I just started comedy then. So
And you
and it wasn't, yeah, I didn't even think that it would be a viable career option for at least another sort of 4 or 5 years after that.
Yeah. And you mentioned there about how you don't think young people know who Jasper Carrot is. I think what people might know, because I don't know if it does around those clips. It probably does. But he hosted Golden Balls, the split and steal at the end. I think people I've seen once. I don't really look online much, but I've seen that someone had made a reference that Jasper Carrot was a Claudia Winkleman of his time because they have like the traitors and the faithful. You have who's gonna? Oh yeah, we'll split it, and then she's like, no, I'm gonna steal it, and I think that just shows that Jasper Carrot is still so well loved if people are comparing him to Claudia Winkleman. I mean the only difference is she's got hair, he doesn't, and and do you reckon that? Do you reckon that those type of things would would also inspire people now because of the way that comedy shifts? Like it was on VHS, it was on DVD, it's on TV. Do you reckon that having it out there in so many mediums will give the next generation that inspiration going and hearing the laughter? Do you reckon that will also inspire the next generation because it's out there in so many different formats?
Probably, yeah. I sometimes worry that people, um, when they create an online content, they do it because they see that as a shortcut to a fast buck.
Yeah.
You know, like, "Oh, I'm going to monetize my videos and stuff like that." Uh, and I hope that people are still doing it for the love of comedy and for, you know, the creative elements to it, rather than just seeing it as a way of monetizing. Um, because there's a lot of things on YouTube and TikTok, and you're just like, oh, I see you've actually just borrowed an idea. I'll try to avoid using the word stolen there. And you've just used it because, and this is where there are so many channels, is you can't keep up with who's doing what. So there is an opportunity there for people to get into it who maybe don't necessarily have what's required and make money. But yeah, I hope so. I hope people still look at it. What I really hope is that people still join it in that old way. I hope that people still want to go out and do those open mics and, you know, write material. I hope I want people to see online as something that accompanies it, or something that you know you do in support of that more analog type of career. So
Yeah.
that's what I hope anyway.
Yeah, and I know that I know from well a fact that there is now ways of doing open mics online, and I know there's I can't remember the name of the group, but there's a selection of newer comedians. One of them I can name went on to appear on the BBC New Comedy Awards, and that was a way of doing it accessible and making it sure that everyone can try comedy. Do you think that's isn't that what's good about an open mic? Is that the way it works? It makes sure that it's accommodating for everyone. That no matter who you are, no matter what you do in life, you can then just rock up and say, "I'll try my two pennies." Do you reckon that that's why open mics are still such a successful form of doing not just comedy but just performing in general?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And they're an absolutely vital way, because you need somewhere where just anybody can come and try. Like, you need, because otherwise, how else do you know that you can do it? How else do you know that you can't?
Yeah,
Um, you know, where else are you going to be able to just write something that afternoon and then go try it? You know, like, it's such an important space. Um, you know, and people are not always, you know, like, if you're not that committed to comedy, you're not going to be organized to, like, you know, write some stuff, work on it, then try and phone someone up and try and get a 10-minute spot on a, or a 5-minute spot on a professional night. Like, open mics are so important, and I hope that they survive through you know, cost of living. I hope they survive through the online media onslaught. What I would just be mindful of, actually, is something I saw recently, is people are filming themselves at open mics and then posting their content online. And I'd look at it and go, this isn't content. You've died on your ass here. Like, sometimes people are just more concerned again. It doesn't matter that I died on my ass. People are still click on it. And I go, yeah, but you are also watering down what people think comedy is.
yeah,
You know, people are less likely to go to pro comedy nights if they think that what they're watching from your YouTube channel, or not, obviously not yours, but, you know, like from theirs and their Instagrams. You know, I think it damages comedy when you see so many people doing it badly online. People go, oh God, I don't like stand-up comedy. You're like, no, 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 you just didn't like this person, or you didn't like this standard. There are other standards.
yeah. And for you personally, when you go to these when you do these open mics and you go to do you think that it's good for you as not just a performer but as a comedian to meet newer people that other people that do other areas of comedy? Do you reckon that helps you then develop your comedy because you know that oh they might be doing backflips whilst saying 40 one line? Do you reckon that that helps you go, oh, there's other aspects I can utilize, that I can take my skill into other areas?
Personally, no. I don't know if it's the same for everyone else. Like I don't do open mics anymore. I haven't done one for a little while. Not to say I won't, because I'm starting to work on a show. So there is an open mic sort of near me, which I think runs on a Wednesday, which is super helpful because I don't do much on Wednesdays. So I might see if I can pop down there and work through some of the stuff that I'm coming up with for the show. But I don't want to sound like an arsehole, but I probably won't be paying too much attention to what's going on around me. Um, I think that those good acts that have, they're onto something, they've written decent comedy, or they're doing something different, they will end up on a pro night anyway, where I'll probably see them, and that's probably when I'll go, oh look, they're doing something different, they're doing something new. Maybe I do need to adapt it or something like that. But with open mics, it's there's just so many different types of thing that you're going to see, both good and bad. And I think that's sometimes the magic of it. Um, go and watch it and just see what happens, and come out the other side of it and just be like, I can't believe I just watched that. I can't believe I just heard that, or both positively and negatively. So yes, so I would encourage people to go and support those nights. Don't expect that to be what pro comedy nights are like, but still, yeah, support it, and I would still encourage people to go. But for me, I don't. Oh yeah, I just think about my art. I don't really pay much attention to other people. I actually feel sick how I'm saying it like now, but that's just the reality of it.
Well, at least you know Ringo Starr record himself live on Facebook tied to a tree for 24 hours. He's only ever done that
What?
one. I've seen that. It's what he calls art. Um, and
Jesus.
and do you think that when you come to do this brand new show, or are you trying to work out whether or not you've got enough things to talk about in a show? Do you think that work in progresses are not just helpful for you to work out what works, what doesn't, but do you reckon they're also fun because you get to do whatever you want, and you know that 50% of it or 20% of it might not end up in the actual show, but at least you've gave these ideas a go?
Yeah, so work in progress is still scare the life out of me a bit, really, because I with the work in progress, so I whenever I've this will be the first full show that I've written, because uh because I see myself more as like a club comic. I've always really focused on sort of doing my 20s and 30s and stuff like that, and I haven't really ever felt like I needed to put a show together. So when I've done newer stuff, I've tend to have gone. So when I first started to write a show, before I bailed on that idea a few years ago, and I was doing those open mics and type stuff, I would just turn up with my sort of 10s and 15 minutes, around a theme, but I would just do it. So people didn't necessarily understand that I was doing a show. My fear, and this is where I say, don't be afraid, and I need to just ignore myself. But my fear is, like, I don't have a massive following. Right? I'm not a huge name by any way, shape, or form. So my fear is that I'll do a work in progress, and everyone who would have come to a show would have already come to the work in progress, where they've seen me do like a slightly shittier version of my show, and gone, okay, that was all right. Now there's no real requirement for me to go to see the finished article. That is something I constantly battle with in my head. So I just kind of need to get over myself and just see what happens. Follow my own advice, but there's always that voice in there going, if you do a work in progress, the 50 people that actually know who you are going to be there, and then they're not going to come to it. Why are you even bothering? Blah 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 blah. So
I don't think that people doing talk shows, no matter what level they are always going to be successful, because you don't know until you try it. It's one of those where if you want to do it, it's like people online. If you want to create a sitcom, well, go ahead and do it. It's your. If it doesn't work, well, at least you tried it, and that's what I think that works really well, because there is no. There wouldn't technically be there might be a slight requirement, but I don't think there's a massive requirement of what you need to be able to go on tour. You can just do the as you want. I think that's what's good about comedy, is that there's not many. There might be a few, but there's not as many boundaries as there might be in the music world, or there might be in the ballerinaing world, or whatever the word is for a collection of ballerinas, a cohort of dancers. And do you think that's what makes comedy the better outcome in the world of art, because there's less boundaries for comedy than there is in the other areas of art?
Yes, I think people are a bit more. I mean, I don't know much about what do you call ballerinaing or whatever, like the dancing or any other sort of performance and things like that. Like, um, I guess people are a bit more willing to listen to your thoughts and ideas and are willing to go on that journey with you where not everything that you say is going to be fantastic, but as long as you keep people interested. Whereas I think with music, it's a bit more tricky in its production. It's a bit more I guess I suppose actually the benefit of music is you can constantly repeat yourself. I guess that's the benefit. Where comedy, once you've one and done, you've said your show, you can't take it to the next one. Um, yeah, I don't really know. I suppose, but the thing I like about comedy the most is I love how simple it is to perform it. That's my favorite thing about it. Is that I was talking to Laura Lex about this the other day. I love the idea that because I am a simple stand-up comedian, I have all of the jokes and material in my head, and I have a voice. I am technically a show all of the time.
Yeah.
Like I could just go somewhere and be a show.
Yeah.
That's what I like about comedy. That's what really makes it attractive to me. Is that, and it's one of the things I always notice about comedians. Um, Bill Burr got a great example of this. It's just how they use the space, their bodies, their voices, the microphone to completely tell a story. So if you want to know what I'm talking about, watch the Helicopter Story by Bill Burr, and it's just him on stage telling a story, but just the way that he positions his body, moves the mic around, creates this, like, you are seeing the story as he's telling it, but you're just watching one man on stage. That's what I like about comedy. It can do that.
And so there we have it, a perfect place to end our interview, the perfect final word. And it's not the final word because I have to talk to end this. So technically, if you really wanted to find a final word to whatever I say at the end, that'll be a final word. Or it'll be a final collection word, which we all call a sentence. And so, for anyone that might be watching this and who might want to get to know you more, without giving away your home address, online, where can people track you down?
Instagram is probably where where I'm most active. So comedy_Mike on Instagram. If you're into listening to me tweet a lot during Arsenal games, you can find me on Twitter. At comedy, might be comedy_Mike again, I think. No, the comedy_Mike, because the other one was already taken. So that's where you can find me on Twitter. But I mean, don't bother following me on there unless you want to hear me ranting about the PGMOL. Instagram mostly, or you can find me on Facebook as well. Instagram. That's what I promote.
And have you got any, like, you probably don't know this, but have you got any upcoming gigs that people can come and see you perform your comedy live?
Lots. So go on Instagram, and every month I post a gig list, so you'll see where I am. It could be in a town near you.
And so, there we have it. Another glorious episode of Joking Apart. Yes, it's a very inventive title, I know. And I don't know what the apart stands for, but you just couldn't use the word joking because then it sounds like I'm trying to be funny, which I'm not trying to be funny because I am funny. Um, no need to be a narcissist. I do that myself. And so, thank you for letting me interview you.
Thanks for having me, mate.
And thank you guys for watching. There should be more episodes of Joking Apart in the future. It will never die! Unless I decide to stop it, then it will die. Or just end. Because if it does die, then that's really confusing. Why have you built a gravestone for something that doesn't really exist in a physical world? Unless you were burning it onto CD, then why on earth would you do that when you could just burn it onto DVD? Or, to be even more impressive, burn it on a VHS. There you go. That'll be a
Old
question
school.
I want. So, thank you guys for watching. Ta-da!